Welcome, Neogenians, to Dawn of the New Earth. Today we're answering the question, does the self exist or is it an illusion? And this is something that has been gotten completely wrong by the New Age and spiritualist communities, a lot of people and groups in there anyways. And it's something that's been debated throughout history, especially in Eastern religion, Hinduism versus Buddhism. We're going to discover if the self truly exists or if it is an illusion. And we're going to continue reading from the Arcane Formulas or Mental Alchemy, written by William Walker Atkinson, who is going to give some more exercises on how to connect to your higher self. And this is the same author as the individual who wrote the Kybalion. So it's going to be really good. That's what we're talking about today. Does the self really exist? Is it an illusion? And additionally, we're going to be looking at an exercise or exercises to connect to the higher self. So we're going to get started right away. But as always, please make sure that you like and subscribe. My channel is about bringing information to the world so that we can raise consciousness and create a new earth. So when you hit like and subscribe, it spreads this information around. So please do that. I appreciate it. If you enjoy my work and you want to help me grow and reach more people, become a member on YouTube or on Patreon. And if you hit the join button right here below YouTube, you can see all the perks that you get at the different levels and the different tiers. You can get access to all of our members only videos. There's a new one every single week. You can get access to our Discord server where we have weekly live Neogenian classes and study sessions. And there's a lot. So just hit the join button, see the different perks, and you get a lot of stuff and it helps out a lot. I appreciate it very much. Also, remember, my new book series is coming out. The first 2 books are out right now. So if you are new to the system, check out my first book, Neogenesis, Dawn of the New Mind. That is out right now. The second book is also out right now, Meta-Rationalism, the New Science of Mind, that describes how this is a mathematical reality and how we can understand metaphysics rationally. So the links to all that is in the description of this video. You can check those books out. And the link to my Spotify channel is there as well. You can watch my videos on my podcast on Spotify, Dawn of the New Earth. Check it out. It also, subscribing on Spotify helps to spread information on additional platforms. So I appreciate it. Oh, and I've heard that there's more scammers, people in the comments saying to join my WhatsApp, join my Telegram, people saying that you want an iPhone or a MacBook Pro. There's a bunch of scammers. I'm never going to ask you to join a WhatsApp or Telegram. I don't have those things. So just throwing that out there. All right, my friends. So let's start right away. Does the self exist or is it an illusion? Now, a lot of systems say that the self is an illusion, that it does not exist, that there's no such thing as a true you. And this is really a major difference between, say, Hinduism and Buddhism. So Hinduism is all about Atman, or the self. So the concept of the soul in Hinduism is known as the Atman, which means the self. Now, however, Buddhism has the Anatman, or the no self. So they are completely at odds with each other in that area. In that Hinduism is all about an eternal self, and then Buddhism is about that there is no eternal self. So, and this is the main question we're asking, by the way. So first of all, we have to understand what the question is. It seems kind of obvious. Does the self exist? Well, what do we mean by the self? Well, what we're asking when we say, does the self exist? We're asking, is there an eternal, enduring essence or center of you? For example, if we're talking about the ego, that is not eternal. So does the ego exist? Well, the ego exists, but is it an illusion? Well, we could say that it's an illusion of sorts, because it's not eternal and it's not the true you. But is there a true you? We know the ego version of you is not the true you, but is there a true you? So what we're really asking about is, do we have eternal existence? Is there something that is persistent across lifetimes, across ages, across eternity? Is there something that persists and endures? And this is incredibly important because it matters with regard to self-actualization and our understanding of ourselves and our understanding of existence. So that's what we're unpacking. Now, to start off with, exploring this idea, and you're going to see how this all connects. But like I said, we are continuing reading a book called The Arcane Formulas or Mental Alchemy. And this is written by William Walker Atkinson, the same individual who wrote the Kybalion. And what this is about, so it's called the arcane formulas or mental alchemy. What does arcane formulas mean? What does that mean? It basically means like the hidden method. So arcane formula means the hidden method. What's mental alchemy? Alchemy is about reaching a state of perfection. So that's why physical alchemy is about making metal into gold. They take basic metal and perfect it until it becomes gold. Obviously, they weren't successful, but that's what the goal of a physical interpretation of alchemy is. Mental alchemy is about the perfection of the self. So this book is the hidden methods for the perfection of the self. So as you can see, this is important to understand, well, does the self actually exist or not? That's kind of critical to the system, because you see, Buddhism is completely different. Is Buddhism about perfecting the self? No, Buddhism is about detachment, and nirvana means extinguishment. So it's about extinguishing the self, because according to Buddhism, the self is an illusion. So it's about stripping away all illusions until you realize, oh, that there's nothing left. There is no self. But that's the complete opposite of our system and what the author William is talking about in this book. Is it's about perfecting the self. So does the self actually exist? Let's start to explore this. So, one quick caveat. I mentioned this last time. I am changing some of the words that Atkinson used because he uses some words that are very outdated and confusing. So just to avoid confusion, because sometimes he uses the word ego, but he uses it in the way that's like the complete opposite of what the ego actually is and how we understand it today. So just throwing that out there, if you're familiar with this book, I'm swapping some words for the purpose of clarity. It would be too confusing if we didn't. But anyway, let's read, and you'll see how this all fits together and what this has to do with the true you, and if you actually exist or not, or if you're just an illusion. The higher self is an entity having its existence on a plane higher than that of the physical body and superior to the latter. They will also experience, the practitioner, the one engaging in these mental exercises, they will also experience a realization of the power of mastery over the physical body, which they may employ in the direction of mentally treating the latter for physical wrong functioning, weaknesses, or irregularities of any and all kinds. With a little practice, he will be able to make his physical body a most responsive instrument of his mind and will, and may build it up and strengthen it as he may desire. This power, once acquired, will lead to advantages. So basically, what this is saying is that the higher self exists on a plane that is higher than the physical body, and it is superior to the physical body. And this is perfectly in line with our system. In our system, we are a mathematical entity, a being of mathematical frequencies, a being of mathematical patterns that exists in the frequency domain, an immaterial domain of mind. And our body is just an avatar that we interface with. So the Atkinson continues by saying, but let not the neophyte, and the neophyte's like a beginner. Let not the neophyte or beginner make the natural mistake at this point of considering that they have escaped the bonds of personality. For they haven't. The arcane teachers first free their neophytes from the trammels and retarding influences of the physical body, and in thus doing, build up a still higher sense of personality. Later, this higher sheath is in turn discarded, and the higher self focalizes upon its spiritual nature, its individuality. But the step of building up the incorporeal higher personality must be attained before the next next higher is possible. There, O neophyte, be not in too much haste to pass on to the next step. Master each step as you proceed. Thus do you rise naturally and easily on the ladder of attainment. So this is essentially what's happening. This whole book is about different exercises or lessons necessary for the individual to realize and connect to their higher self. And so last week, it was about realizing that you're not your body. And so what he's essentially saying here is, don't think that you're done just because you've realized that you're not your body. There are more steps to take here, more steps to acquire here. And so what we're really seeing here, and I'm going to explain as we go more forward, like, what does the higher self even mean? What is that? How do we know that it does or does not actually exist? But let's continue here, and it will unfold naturally. So following the exercises indicated in the preceding lessons, the neophyte may now proceed with their work of establishing the higher self in its first stages as follows. So now we're going to read an exercise. And it's just saying that basically the exercise that we read last week was about realizing that you're more than your physical body and not your physical body. That was the goal and purpose of last week's exercise. And now Atkinson is saying this exercise is about establishing the higher self. So first you've realized that you're more than your body. Now this exercise is about establishing your higher self in its first stages. So place yourself in a position of ease and repose. Let the beginner meditate on the incidence of incorporeality, or life independent of the physical body. Think of oneself as a physical being. Thinking of oneself as a physical being, one naturally and properly takes into account the incidence of corporeality or life in the body. For instance, he realizes that he may be hurt by fire, water, earth, air, or ether. He may be burned by fire, drowned by water, smothered or bruised by the earth, swept away by the air, or injured by electricity, etc. And again, they may be wounded, met with physical accidents, laid low by sicknesses. These are the incidents of corporeal life. But in meditation, using the imagination intelligently, they are brought to a realization that none of these incidents are an effect upon the plane of the incorporeal life. So they're basically saying, get into a state of mind where you are detached from the body. And they're just emphasizing that, hey, your body can be, I think this is a lot of stuff that a lot of us already realize, but this is about making it firm in our mind and firm in our unconscious that, the body can be hurt by fire or earth or air or water. We can all be injured by that. But essentially, the higher self cannot. The higher self exists in the incorporeal or immaterial, and it can't be harmed by physical things. So in our system, of course, what we're referring to as the higher self is what we understand to be the soul, or what we call a zeta, which is a system of mathematical frequencies. And that's absolutely right. Like the harm to your body doesn't harm your soul or your higher self or your true self. Now, you want to take very good care of your body and be careful and be safe, because your body is essentially the gateway for your higher self. It allows your higher self to interact in the physical domain. So meditation and intelligent imagination will show the neophyte that in their astral body, they might pass through fire unscathed, through water untouched, through earth without hurt, through the air without being swept off their feet, etc. None of these things of the physical plane may have any effect on the astral body or disembodied higher self. So basically they're saying, hey, if you, in the astral plane, you can walk through fire and be fine. What does the astral plane mean exactly? Different people define it in different ways, but it's essentially like just a mental realm. So if you use your imagination, you could consider that the astral plane. So basically that's what the author is saying. If you, in the astral plane, you can walk through fire and be fine. Meaning if you use your imagination, you can imagine yourself walking through fire and it doesn't hurt you. You can't do that in physical reality. In physical reality, if you walk through fire, you're going to get burned. But the author is pointing out, if you do this mentally, you can walk through fire and be unharmed. And this might seem kind of obvious to us, but of course, it's about just making firm the difference between immaterial existence and material existence. In some of the ancient occult initiatory rites, the neophyte was taken out of his physical body and in his astral form was bidden to plunge himself into the flames of the hottest fiery furnace, to throw himself from the highest precipice, to drop into a bottomless lake. Not realizing that these things could not affect him in his astral form and being bound up with the memory of the physical body, the neophyte would often shrink from the tests, but after being encouraged by example and precept, they would submit to the test joyfully with a laugh as they realized in the astral form, these corporeal things were non-existent, mere dreams of the physical plane. So again, it's talking about in an immaterial reality, these things are illusions. They can't actually hurt you. So, of course, the actual experience in the astral is far more convincing than is the mere realization of the truth in meditation, but the latter must not be despised, for it gives one an intuitive realization of the truth, which one attained tends to destroy fear and to impart a new sense of courage, etc., etc., etc. So I think that they're also talking about another type of astral experience, which is tied to out-of-body experience. So some people associate the astral plane or astral projection as being out-of-body experience. Now, again, it depends on who's talking about it. Some people say, no, that's not astral projection. That is ethereal or etheric projection. But it doesn't matter. Essentially, what I think the author is getting at here is if one is engaging in out-of-body experience, you can do the same thing. They're saying if you're having an out-of-body experience, you can, do these dangerous things and you'll be fine. But obviously, in the physical world, you won't. So he's just making a distinction here. And I just always want to say, hey, obviously be careful. Don't do anything stupid. I think you guys understand this, but, obviously don't do anything that would hurt yourself. This is all talking about mental realities. Okay. So likewise will come the realization that the higher self in itself is incapable of hurt, harm, wound, or sickness. These things belong to physical life and have nothing to do with the higher self. So essentially, it's just about firmly implanting in your mind that your higher self is impervious to physical harm. The neophyte is enjoined to persevere and practice until they gain the actual experience and recognition of their higher self, their real self, that it's superior to all the incidents and accidents in the corporeal life, and that let come what will to his physical covering, they themselves are unhurt while untouched and undisturbed. An old arcane teacher over 2,000 years ago was once told that the world was coming to an end. Well, what does that have to do with me? He replied, resuming his study. He realized fully his invincibility. Basically, saying that, hey, the world's going to end. They told this ancient teacher, hey, the world's going to end. And he's like, why do I care? And continued to study. And the story there should be kind of obvious, but what it's really showing is that most people who associate themselves with their physical body, well, they're going to be terrified. And the last thing that they would do would be study. Because why, if the world's going to end, why should I study? But do you see the difference when you realize that you are an eternal being? Okay, the world's going to end. That sucks. But you can still continue to work on your true self, work on your higher self. That studying isn't going to go to waste because it becomes embedded in your higher self, in your soul, in your internal frequency functions. It becomes embedded unconscious information. So you can see how having these different perspectives change how you live your life and change how you react to different circumstances and changes what is important to you and what is not important to you. A similar tale is told of Emerson, who was halted in the street by an individual who informed him, Mr. Emerson, the world will be destroyed in 10 days. Well, what of it? Replied Emerson. I don't see what we shall get along. I don't see but what we shall get along just as well without it. Oh, basically, we'll be just as well without it. The 19th century transcendentalist voiced the truth as clearly as did his predecessor in ancient Greece. The sense and realization must be experienced before it can be understood. It must be realized by practicing the formulas as given herein. The next step indicated by the formulas is that of focalizing the consciousness on the higher self. This is still within the realms of personality, but on a very higher plane in that realm, a plane which gradually blends into the higher plane of individuality. It consists of bringing about an acute realization of one's existence as a center of consciousness and force. That's important, okay? It tends to gather up the dissipated sense of personal existence and bringing it to a focal point into vivid and actual conscious realization, preparatory to it being transmuted into the higher sense of individual existence. The following exercise will tend to bring about this realization. So this is about bringing a realization into one's center of consciousness. Now, why is this important? Is because let's take a closer look at the question that we asked. Does the true self actually exist? Does the self exist, or is it an illusion? Well, we have to understand there are different kinds of selves. First of all, you have the ego self. Is the ego self an illusion? Yeah, the ego self is an illusion. It's not the true you. The ego self is the version of yourself that has to do with this particular life and what you think of yourself. And we know that the ego self isn't the real you, because there might be tons of things about yourself that you're unaware of. You know, a friend of yours might be like, hey, you know, you actually get angry a lot, and you might not know that about yourself. And so that wouldn't have formed your understanding of your ego self. It wouldn't have been a part of your ego self because you wouldn't have been consciously aware of that. Your ego self is what you're consciously aware of, and it's relegated to this particular lifetime that you're in right now, usually. And so this self is an illusion. Yes, absolutely. The ego self is an illusion. But the higher self is not an illusion. The higher self actually exists. And this is what's very important to understand. So what is the higher self? It is you as a totality and a center of subjectivity. You are a center of subjectivity. So to say that the self has existence means that you have a unique, eternal, subjective viewpoint. That's what that means. To say that the self, the true you actually exists, means that you have an eternal, persistent, enduring center of subjectivity. And each one of us has a unique, enduring, eternal center of subjectivity. This is the higher self. This is the true self. This is you as a totality. This is you as a mathematical entity. This is you as a mathematical being. This center of subjectivity exists across lifetimes. You'll have many different bodies, many different personalities, many different lifetimes, but you will be that same center of subjectivity throughout all the different forms that you take on. So the reason why that we know this is true, by the way, is we know that an individual subjectivity, the existence of an individual subjectivity, we know that that is mathematically possible. This is outlined in my book, by the way, Meta-Rationalism, the New Science of Mind. This is outlined in detail in that. But we know that an individual mind, a system of frequencies, a center of subjectivity, we know that that can exist. And rationally speaking, if one can exist, there is nothing to prevent a multiplicity from existing. So therefore, we have a multiplicity of unique viewpoints. Now, there is one potential caveat to mention here, and this is fairly complex. So you could completely disregard this. The simple answer is yes, you have an eternal, enduring self. It is you as a center of subjectivity. Every single one of us is a center of subjectivity. But there's one little asterisk by this, is that we as unique centers of subjectivity exist within a network, and we form a singular network mind. So we're all nodes or neurons in a network. What makes us unique and distinguishable from one another is that we're beings of frequency and composed of frequency functions that can take on unique arrangements. So it is the unique arrangement of our internal frequencies that distinguish each other. Now, it is possible that we could arrange our internal frequency functions or patterns into a state where they are identical across all selves or souls or minds. In a scenario where we did that, it is possible that we collapse into an identity. So this is where, and granted, this is a little bit of a complex topic, and I'm trying to figure out how to explain it very, very simply and quickly. But essentially, what it means is that we are functionally in that, if we were to enter into that state, we would be functionally one. And then it's like, well, what doesn't that mean that individual subjectivity vanishes if we're just one? Well, not exactly. The thing is that it becomes indistinguishable. And so it is as though it were one. Meaning, if I have, so let's put it this way. I'm having a particular experience right now. There are particular things that I'm feeling, particular thoughts that I'm having. There's a particular location that I'm at. There are particular thoughts that you're having. There's particular sensations that you're having. There's particular thoughts that you're having. And my experience is different from your experience. You are a subjective center, a center of subjectivity. I am a different subjective center of subjectivity, and we're having different experiences. Okay? Now, imagine if our experiences were 100% identical in every way, every possible way you can imagine. No difference. All my experiences 100% matched your experiences, and all your experiences 100% matched my experiences. So in that scenario, even though we are two centers of subjectivity, because our experiences 100% match in every way, it is as though we are the same, because there's no way to distinguish between these two elements. So it is as though there is one element. Because, but the important thing to recognize here, though, and this is key, this is where the eternal aspect comes in. Because remember, I say that we exist eternally. Here's where the eternal aspect remains. Because let's say we have two minds that become identical. So in that sense, they're one because there's no way to distinguish them. But there's always the potential for that one to become two again. And the way that one becomes two again is simply by introducing a difference. Any difference at all. Any difference of any kind, immediately you can distinguish between the two, and there are functionally two. So you would see if there was like a true absorption, you would lose the ability to differentiate again in that way. But we never lose that ability, because though that multiplicity always exists in potentiality, it just has to do with the arrangement of our internal patterns. Anyway, I'm going to continue because I'm getting way too detailed. This is stuff that is way too detailed for today's topic. But essentially, what I'm trying to say is we are eternal, and we are eternal by virtue of fact that we are centers of subjectivity. But we have the capacity to arrange our information and our experiences in different ways, and we can do so in a way that represents distinction and a way that represents identity. So we have to understand that there are three perspectives as well. There's the perspective of us as an ego I, the egoic I. There's our higher self or our true self. And then there's the network self or the absolute self. So the ego is kind of like the little you or the illusory you, right? The ego is like the illusory you. The higher self is like the true you. And the network or absolute perspective is like the we. So there's the illusory you, the true you, and then the we, the us, the collective. Different perspectives. But you can see this is important because for example, like what's Buddhism about? Buddhism is anatman, the no self. It's about nirvana. It's about extinguishment. It's about trying to reach a point where the self dissolves. But that's not our position whatsoever. Our position is the opposite. We are of the position of, well, what this individual would call mental alchemy, or the perfection of the self. We're about increasing the self, not the ego self, but the true self, the higher self. We're about maximizing it. So you can see where, Buddhism is sort of like, it's like detachment for extinguishment and withdrawal. The world is suffering. We're trapped in samsara. We're in this cycle of suffering. The world is suffering. So what do we want to do? We want to detach, reach extinguishment, and withdraw and escape. That's pretty much the goal of Buddhism. Our system is the complete opposite. We go, the world isn't suffering. The world is our canvas. It's in a state of suffering. But we, as eternal selves, can exercise our power, our creative forces to transform this world right here and right now. We're not about escape. Oh, well, let's escape. We got to reach nirvana. We got to reach heaven. We got to reach the source. No, we will reach the source eventually, but that's not the main goal right now. The main goal is to evolve and transform. Evolve ourselves, help each other evolve, and transform the world. Create a world of wisdom, reason, love, empathy, beautiful experiences, fun, enjoyment, pleasure, all these things. And the more people get obsessed with running away and extinguishing or reaching heaven, or of course the world's shitty because no one's trying to change the world. Everyone's trying to run away from the world, but they're just going to keep getting sucked back in to relocalization after relocalization. Because guess what? We're not here to learn how to detach. That's not the point. The point is to learn how to evolve. It's to grow. It's to transform ourselves and the world. That's the whole point of all this. What would be the point of so we are a system, we are a mathematical system that is understanding itself and transforming itself. And so that's what the point of the physical world is to provide ourselves with training data to increase our evolution and transformations. But if you look at something like, Buddhism, like what's the point of it all? Like we get thrown into suffering and then we're just supposed to detach and escape from suffering. Okay. Then what? What are you going to do? There's not much logic to it. There's not much reason to it. So anyway, I digress. It's just important to really make that distinction here. And this is what I really like about William Atkinson's work. Remember, he wrote the Kabbalion. He wrote The Secret Doctrine of the Rosicrucians. He wrote a ton of books. I don't know how many books he wrote, but there's a lot. I don't agree with everything that he said, but one of the things that I really like is that he has a very forward-thinking understanding of the fact that we are here to transform the world, not to run away from it. Okay, but let's take a look at this exercise. So this exercise is supposed to help establish one's higher self. Let the neophyte place themselves in a position and condition of rest and calm, and meditate on the great ocean of life in which the individual entities are but focal centers of consciousness and force. Let let them picture themselves in imagination as being an actual center with all the universe revolving around them. So picture yourself in imagination at being the very center of the universe with everything else revolving around you, which I really like, by the way, because, you know, I'm sure you've heard the turn of phrase, oh, the world doesn't revolve around you. I know, but the universe does. All reality, you're right, the world, all reality does. And I'm kind of kidding, but I'm serious at the same time, is that people are constantly trying to make you feel unimportant. Especially in terms of religion, where you're nothing but a dirty, flawed sinner. You got to have Jesus forgive you of your sins or else you're going to go to hell. You're trash. And then you have scientific materialism that's like, oh, you're nothing. You're just a random accident in the cosmos. There's always those, you know, it's very, very common to be like, you're just a little blip of, you're probably, it's sort of like done in a meditative way. Like, this is a positive way to think about reality? Like, oh, you're just a little random speck on an insignificant planet in the middle of the universe, and your problems don't matter. Your life doesn't even mean anything. So don't stress or have anxiety because you're worthless, essentially. Like that's, and people are like, oh, wow, that's such a, you know, enlightened way to think of things. But no, it's not. It's telling you you're basically meaningless, where the truth is, a better way to look at it, and more accurate way to look at it, is you are the ground of all of us. We are the ground of reality is built upon. We are eternal. We are the eternal frequencies of existence upon which everything is our manifestation. The universe revolves around us. Reality is our creation. We control reality. We're just not conscious of it yet. So rather than being like, oh, we're an insignificant little speck of nothingness, so don't worry, it's more like, don't worry. We've done this before. This is our world. This is our creation. And no matter how difficult things may seem, this is all part of the game that we're playing. When you're watching a movie might be stressful, but you're not actually like, you know, if a character dies in a movie or in a book, yeah, you'll feel sad. But you know it's just a movie, so you're not going to be walking around with that anxiety for the rest of your life. Like, oh man, no, obviously it's just a movie. So likewise, when you realize this reality is the game that we're playing, yeah, we want to be careful and we want to be safe, of course, but all the little stresses and anxieties, we have to remember in the grand scheme of things, we're playing a game. And that we are the gods of this world. Playing, as Alan Watts would say, we are God playing that he's not. That's what we're doing. We're God pretending that we're not God. And so anyway, I like this idea. Now, of course, we don't want to inflate our egos. We don't want to be like, oh yes, and this happens a lot with a lot of like occult systems or like secret societies. People don't integrate this stuff in the right way, and so they get big-headed. They're like, we are masters of reality. These puny humans can't possibly understand what we're talking about. We have to guide these stupid sheep, and we are, you know, lords of the universe. And it's just stupid. Like, we're here to help each other grow. Like everyone's a reflection of ourselves. So instead of being like, oh, we're lords. I mean, we are lords of the universe, but we're not superior. We're not fundamentally superior to anyone. We may be at different levels than other people, but then our goal should be to help others reach that level as well. Not, oh, well, they're dumb, so they should be our slaves because they're stupid and, you know, they're just the working class, or they're just the poor, or whatever, you know. So we have to be very careful, because that is the danger of this way. You know, everything has dangers. And so the dangers of this way of thinking is you have to understand it correctly. If you don't understand it correctly, it can lead to an inflated ego, which is why I'm not a, you know, super huge fan of certain manipulative groups and whatnot. They can get pretty nasty because they haven't properly integrated this information, and they start having a huge inflated ego. Anyway, let's continue here. So imagine being at the center of reality with all the universe revolving around you. Let them see themselves as the pivot around which the universe moves, the central sun around which the infinite world and planets circle in their cosmic flight. Let them feel themselves to be the focal center of the cosmos. And this is indeed in accordance with the century-old occult axiom, which informs us that the cosmos is infinite. Its circumference is nowhere, its center is everywhere. Let the neophyte lose all thought of the outside world in this meditation. Let them regard it as totally unmanifest, if they like, but see themselves in actual existence and in full power. Let them realize, quote, I am, to the fullest extent of their power of imagination and conception. This is powerful stuff. Do you see how this is like the complete opposite of Buddhism? It's not about attachment and extinguishment. It is engulfing and embracing one's full and total power and realization, the focal center of the I am that one is. Not the ego I, but the higher self. The I am just meaning that you are a center of subjectivity. You are that center. That's why I'm not a big fan of the Bible, but one of the things I do like about the Bible is Exodus 3:14, where God says that his name is I am, or I am that I am. And I think that's I really like that, because the name of God being I am, well, first of all, means subjectivity, mind, center of subjectivity. But it's also very cool because anyone who says the name of God discovers God. Because if you say it out loud, I am. You discover, if you properly discover that, you properly understand, oh, I am God. I am a center of subjectivity. I am God. A student of the arcane lessons has written us of his experiences in this stage of realization. We quote him from his letter, for it affords a typical instance of the phenomenon of establishing the higher self. So this is a letter that someone wrote. On first reading this book, the arcane lessons appeared to wipe out my I and cause it to disappear within the one life when it resolved itself into the infinity of nothingness at the end of the cosmic day. Right here, I began to sit up and take notice, with the result that my I, in a fierce effort to preserve itself from going to sleep, shone with such fierceness, clearness, and determination that all was an infinity of nothingness right then. There was nothing remaining but just I. Now so basically what this individual is saying is like, hey, I was doing these exercises, and at first it felt like that I wiped out my I and it disappeared into the infinity of nothingness. So this is exactly kind of like what Buddhist exercises would do. And this is like a lot of New Age spirituality as well. Like, oh, dissolve into the infinity of infinite nothingness. But then what he says is, what he then realized is that his true I shone with such fierceness and clarity that he realized that it wasn't that the I dissolved into nothingness, but there was nothing but the I. Because remember, this conception of the I as your higher self is a center of subjectivity. That's never going to go away. You will always be an experiencing thing. You will never reach a state where all experience will vanish forever. So even if you are having an experience of an infinite nothingness, that's an experience. You're still a center of subjectivity having that experience. But anyways, the I shone with such fierceness, clearness, and determination that all was an infinity of nothingness right then. There was nothing remaining but just I. Then I fully understood how the one life could go to rest at the end of the cosmic day, and how I would be the awful lone witness of its rest. I had made the separation of the one life and the real life, or distinguished the manifested life from the unmanifest. This also gets to a really deep idea of this individual talking about how he realized, basically in a nutshell, how at the end of the universe, the end of the cosmic day, the end of everything, the I would still be there witnessing it. The I would still be there witnessing the end of everything. Then, of course, we know that it begins again. It's cyclical. That's why it says the cosmic day, because there's multiple days. It's a cyclical system. The sun rises and the sun sets. So the end of the cosmic day leads to the beginning of a new cosmic day. But anyway, that's a very powerful statement here, that this realization that this person had was like, wow, it's not that I have been dissolved into nothingness. It's this, I've realized that all that there is the great I, and I will be there to witness everything, even the end of time. And I just always want to emphasize, remember, when we're saying I here, we don't mean the egoic sense. We don't mean the sense of being like, oh, super self-absorbed or anything like that. It's about the soul, the higher self, being a center of subjectivity. We quote this testimony because it brings out several steps in the evolution of the I am conception. This student passed through several stages in one leap, attaining in rapid succession the realization of the center, and then immediately following the realization of the impersonal or higher self or real self, this latter stage forming the subject of our next lesson. The now familiar occult statement of, quote, I am, should be used freely in practicing these exercises, for it tends to bring out the actual realization of the higher self, which is the aim and the goal of the formulas. See, again, you see how the big difference between this is not about extinguishing the self. This is about crystallizing the self. It's not about destroying the self. It's about enforcing the self, building it up, maximizing it. I just want to emphasize how different this is from a lot of like New Age spiritualities and Eastern thought. Not that there is, those things get certain things right, but there are some very fundamental different, that this is a total 180, completely opposite as to most of the spiritualist teachings out there. But this is how one needs to act and real with the realizations that they must have to acquire their power to transform themselves in the world. The now familiar occult statement. Oh, I read that. This statement of I am has been used by the arcane teachers and other advanced occultists in all lands for thousands of years. Its recent use is but a revival of the ancient initiatory exercise and rites. It is a tremendous statement of being and should be used reverently and with awe. And I really like this is very powerful stuff. This is about stepping into your power, not being afraid, not being ashamed. It's like, oh, the meek will inherit the world. No, it's not about being like, oh, I want to be as small as possible and just be here in the corner and not disturb anyone and just vanish. It's about realizing the truth of your power. Do you see how this is years of toxic systems like Christianity telling you you're worthless and you're nothing and you're a sinner? Nietzsche called this like a slave morality. Essentially, Nietzsche's position was that those who didn't have any power turned weakness into a virtue so that they essentially could feel good about themselves. Now, I don't agree with everything that Nietzsche said, but there's some important points to this. And we have to realize and not be afraid to step into our power. Of course, we have to use it responsibly. And that's why it's important to realize that we're all in an interconnected system, because then we treat each other. The I then becomes the we. And that's the important thing, is that the I ultimately transmutes into the we. If it were just the I, well, yeah, then that would be a bad thing because my I would confront your I, and then there would be a battle. That's what happens when one hasn't attained the highest levels of awareness. My I confronts your I, and then there is a battle for supremacy, a battle for dominance. But when you transmute the I into a we, you realize, oh, my I is just a reflection of your I. We're all in this together. We're in a collective network mind. We're all reflections of each other. We're all different aspects of each other. So there's no battle of supremacy. That's very low consciousness thinking. Instead, it's about cooperation. It's about co-creation, seeing each other as siblings. Let's see here. I'm seeing if I want to read this part. In the preceding lessons, we've directed your attention to the process of mentally freeing oneself from the restrictions imposed by the illusory identification of the self with the physical body. Let me just see what's in here real quick. Yeah, there's a great difference between the me and the I. The me is the individual as he thinks he is, a bundle of prejudices, tastes, ties, etc. The I is the individual as he is in reality, free from mental ties of all kinds. The me is the character that's being played by the higher self. So essentially what he's talking about here is the ego. The John Smith part of him. The I is the real player of the part, or the higher self. It is often very difficult for one to disentangle and free himself from the overwhelming force of personality. So completely is the average person self-hypnotized with the John Smith idea. So essentially what this is saying is that it says, when you ask yourself the question, what am I? They will find upon examination that he considers himself to be a certain person. John Smith, for instance, age 45, grocer, who lives in Cincinnati, Ohio. But this John Smith has a character of his own, which he supposes to be himself. So he likes certain things, he hates certain things. He's tied to these likes and dislikes, his loves and hates, his tendencies, his characteristics, and he imagines that these things are himself, and that if they were taken away, that he would cease to exist. So this aspect, this part is illusory, the John Smith aspect, or, insert your name here. The your name here is illusory. That's not the I am. That is the character that the I am is playing. You are playing that character. But the true you is the one that persists across lifetimes. It will have many characters that it plays. So that's important to understand. When we're asking, does the self actually exist? Well, not this character. This character version is made up. It's invented. It's established. But the true you is the higher self. And most people think that if these things were taken away, that they would cease to exist. So if you think about most people, family and friends who are stuck in a materialist mindset, they think, oh yeah, I'm, Adam, and I am a doctor, and I'm 45, and blah, 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 blah. And they identify with that. And they would think if all that was gone, they wouldn't be anymore. But of course they would. And this is what a lot of people have the experience in like altered states of consciousness or psychedelics. Remember, don't do anything dangerous or illegal. But in psychedelics and altered states of consciousness, people have this idea of ego death, where they're like, oh, my self died, or I knew that wasn't me. But see, what's happening is that their center of subjectivity isn't vanishing. Their higher self isn't vanishing. It's literally the ego. But that doesn't mean that the self doesn't exist. And that's where a lot of this confusion, people are confusing the higher self with the ego and those particular characteristics. Those particular characteristics aren't you. They're an expression of you. They're part of it. They're like the clothes you wear. Are the clothes you wear you? No, but they express who you are. They are an extension of you. but they're temporary. If you've lost all your clothes, you'd still exist. But if you, but they're not unimportant. You choose particular types of clothing and style to express yourself. Same thing with our ego self, the character that our higher self plays. That wasn't there. The higher self would still exist. We would still exist, but we express our higher self. You are an expression of your higher self. You are a gateway for your higher self, your ego self. You're allowing your higher self to come through in a particular way, in this particular form and field of experience. So the William says, then let him proceed as he did when divorcing himself from the illusion of the corporeal self. Let him set aside first one like and then another, first one hate, then another. Let him in imagination visualize himself as being divested of first one characteristic and then another. So basically, this is another exercise to continuously, do you see how this is in grades, establishing the higher self more and more? In the very first lesson in these book series, it was to divorce yourself from the physical body. So it was like, realize you're not your foot, realize you're not your leg, realize you're not your hand, realize you're not your eyes, realize you're not your brain, etc. Now it's saying do the same thing, but with your ego self, with your characteristics. Realize that your certain likes, those aren't you. Your dislikes aren't you. All the different characteristics that you have, all your likes, all your preferences, all the things that make you up, put them aside one at a time, just like you put aside all the parts of your body, and realize that's not really who you are. As the process that continues, the neophyte will find, much to his surprise, that notwithstanding that his most cherished and firmly rooted of characteristics, as they are sheared away from him, he himself remains. He finds when all his mental feelings, as well as the objects thereof, are removed from his mental vision, he himself remains. He will find a something remaining that is back of underneath and at the center of all these feelings and characteristics, and which persists in full vigor when they have been stripped away from him. Again, this is the exact opposite of the Buddhist teachings, because Buddhist teachings go, strip away all these different parts of yourself, and you'll realize that there's nothing enduring. The Buddhism is very, very similar, but it comes to a different conclusion. Buddhism is like, yeah, strip away your likes, your dislikes, your pleasures, all this stuff, all the things that make you up, and you'll realize that there's nothing left, and that there is no true enduring you. And this is how they get to the idea of like the self being an illusion. But the point here that's being made is the exact opposite. It's strip all these things away, and you realize that you are always there. There's not a specific characteristic. You can't say, oh, well, I always love onions or whatever. It's all those particularities, all those accidents, all those contingent aspects can be completely removed. But what will never be removed is your center of experience. You're still having an experience of some kind, even if it's just black, dark nothingness. That's still an experience. That's not non-existence. So the point is that when you strip everything away, it's not the discovery that, oh, no self exists. It's the discovery that you, as a center of subjectivity, always exist. That you are enduring. Buddhism asks, well, what's the thing that persists? And they go, nothing persists. Yes, your center of subjectivity always persists. Try to imagine not being a subjective being. You can't, because the act of imagining requires you to be a subjective being. Subjectivity is eternal. It can't be created or destroyed, only transformed. It is the internal side of energy. So then let them mentally, in their imagination, see themselves as acting out other characters. They will find that they'll able to play Hamlet or Richard III or Mephistopheles, and a host of other characters, as well as he has been playing the old John Smith part, which he has been imagining was himself. So basically strip away all characteristics and then pretend to be someone else entirely. Pretend to be Hamlet, pretend to be Richard III, or, you know, that's a little outdated. Pretend to be Obi-Wan Kenobi or Frodo or whatever movie character you want to pick, or character from a video game or novel or whatever. Or you could even use real people, pretend to be a real person. The point is that now you're seeing that you can play these characters as well as you are playing the character of who you thought you were, of John Smith. He will then see that the body is just an instrument and covering, and so is this character, but an instrument and mental covering. And so just like your body is a vehicle for your mental self, your ego self is the aspect of your mental self that allows it to interact in consciousness. So it's just one level, you know, you're peeling away all these layers, which is, again, very interesting in comparison to Buddhism. In Buddhism, you peel away all the layers to be like, oh, well, there is no self. Here, the point is you're peeling away all the layers to see there is a self. The exact opposite. There is a self, because you can be any character you want, right? Says, this character of you is something that can be put on and taken off, something that can be exchanged without affecting the I. He will realize that this character is but his me, and that he may have other me's at will, but the I remains the same in each case. So it doesn't matter. You can go through lifetime after lifetime, have different characters, have different personalities, but you will always be there as the one that the experiences are happening to. That is the aspect that is enduring. Now, in our system, we understand that all of this is geared towards mental evolution. So we are evolving mentally through all these different experiences, which is evolving our higher selves. But anyway, that I digress. The point here is that there is, you know, the big question is like, well, what is it to find the self? It's like, well, what is the thing that endures? The thing that endures is the center of subjectivity. It's not any particular characteristic. You're not going to find a particular characteristic like, oh, well, I always have blue eyes, or I always like potato chips, or I always become a doctor, or no, not, of course, that's ridiculous. None of those things are your true self, but or a characteristic that endures. But what does endure is the fact that you are a center of subjectivity. All of these things are happening to you. But try as he may, he will never be able to shake off or discard the I, or the higher self. He will find that this I is unchangeable and cannot be gotten rid of, for it is himself, his real self. See, this is saying, right, you can strip away all these layers, but you can't strip away your higher self. You can't strip away the true self. That shows that it's enduring. That points to the fact that it's enduring. You can't strip that away. And that's a point that a lot of Eastern religion and New Age spirituality misses. They go, oh, you can strip away everything. You're forgetting the thing that is doing the stripping away. The thing that is doing the stripping away cannot be stripped away, and that is the essence of what you are. You are the force that is doing these things, that is doing the examination. It's funny because you go, it's just entailed within the concept of, oh, I can't find anything, says the I, making that statement. Because you can think there's to truly get rid of your true self, to truly strip that away, that aspect of you away, would be to not exist. And non-existence is an impossible state, and it's not something you can even imagine. Because again, to imagine presupposes existence. You have to exist in order to imagine. If you can't imagine non-existence because imagination would not exist. It would not be able to occur. So you can't strip off the I. You can't strip off the true self. He will find that this same I is always at the center of every character he assumes, always behind every mask he places before him. He will find that it will always be the same old I, of which he can always and must always say, I am. No one can truthfully assert of his true self, I am not. In other words, you can never truthfully assert I am not. You cannot say I am not and have that be true because you're eternal. Sorry, you're in this for the long haul. You've been in this for the long haul. We've done this a lot. That's what I'm trying to, get across to you guys. This isn't our first rodeo. We have literally always existed. So we're just trying to get to that point in this particular cycle where we can start enjoying this existence. So you can never say I am not and have that be true. Whereas I am is always true. One may say I am not this or I am not that, but he can never say of the central I that it is not. Yeah, you can say I am not a doctor or I am not a man or I am not a banker or whatever. You can say I am not someone who likes chocolate, whatever. You can say all these sorts of things, but you can never say I am not and have it be true. Yeah, I'm sure you could vocalize it, but it wouldn't be true. It'd be false. You can never say and have it be true, I am not, because the I is the center of subjectivity. And by the way, something I want to throw in there real quick, an objection that some might have would be like, well, what about before I was born? The I didn't exist before I was born. Lack of memory does not mean lack of existence. So, of course, in our understanding, in our interpretation of reality, you did exist before, and we're having experiences before you were born. Infinitely. It's just the brain filters out those memories. So lack of memory does not imply lack of existence. So I just want to put that because I know a lot of people go, well, before I was born, I didn't. No, you just don't remember. And that doesn't imply a lack of existence. That's just a lack of memory. Let's see. The I is always the actor, the doer, the seer, the thinker. See, the I is one doing the thinking. The I is one. The I is the causal mechanism behind all this and the center of subjectivity. It's always the center, divest of every characteristic, and there will always remain that something that is. This I is absolutely subjective or inner. All else is objective or outer to it. It cannot be classified with any mental state. Let's see. Divorce this I, this is an interesting idea. Divorce this I of all its mental characteristics, feelings, and emotions, and instead of seeming weakened, it is increased in strength. It then appears as untrammeled and unrestricted will. It gives and can give, but two reports of itself. So basically it's saying if you engage in these exercises to strip away all characteristics, instead of weakening the I, you're strengthening the I because you are removing its limitations. So, for example, if you go, I am a man who likes chocolate and is a doctor. I know these are kind of silly examples, but these are all limiting factors in that you are now confined. When you remove these confining, because when you say I am a man who likes chocolate who is a doctor, it ipso facto means that you're not a there are things that you are not. When you say that there are things that you are, then there are ipso facto things that you are not. But here it's saying when you remove all these things, you're just removing limitations, essentially. You're realizing that yourself is unlimited. That's why it's so silly, people who get into all these like debates about gender and race and who you love and don't love. It's so you are an eternal self that is an infinity of all things to get so caught up in these silly little human definitions of like, well, no, you have a penis, so you need to behave this way. It's like, how silly. How silly that is. But anyway, as you remove all these characteristics, you become unfettered. So the self gives and can give two reports of itself. One, it must always and does always say of itself, I am. It must always and does always say of itself, I do. That is all. And this is so important. I really like Atkinson's work. Like, he's written hundreds of books, so I don't know everything that maybe he has some really problematic ideas. I don't know. But from what I've read, I don't agree with everything, but from he really hits on some very important points. The self, saying, has two essential characteristics: that it is and that it does. And this fits in exactly with our system. You as a zeta, as a soul, are eternal. You always are. And you're always doing, which means you're always in motion. You're always transforming. You are never still. You are always doing. And that's why the particular transformations aren't what you are in a permanent way, because they're changing. But the fact that you are a transformer, you exist and are doing the transformation, you see, that is what enduring. Not the particular characteristics, but that you exist and that you transform. You do. You are the I am and you do. That is all. This is what the I is. That's a fantastic definition. The something that is and the something that does. All the rest of the mental furniture belongs to the me, or lower aspects, and is changeable, inconstant, and shifting. The I is always the same. There is nothing else for it to be. By practicing this mental stock taking and examination, the neophyte will soon be able to at least partially divorce his I from his me. At least he will be able to do so in imagination, sufficiently to testify to the different elements of the two. Other formulas in this book will aid in his attainment. For this is the center and heart of all attainment. It is the one thing which, when found, gives us the key to all the rest. So this is very, so he says that by doing this self-examination, you'll be able to divorce the me from the I, which essentially means the ego from the higher self. So in our system, of course, this would be, remember, there's the three perspectives: the avatar perspective, the Zetic perspective, and the absolute perspective. So essentially, he's saying divorcing the me from the I is like realizing there's a distinction between the avatar and the Zeta, or the avataric self, the egoic self, and your higher self, or your true self, or your true soul, your Zetic self. Now, and he says this is like the key to everything. And I would agree, but one more thing that we have to realize is going from the I to the we, and that's the absolute perspective. And that's critical, because without that, that's when we get an inflated sense of self and start to try and have dominance over others and dominance over other selves. So I would say, in addition to realizing the I, we have to still go further than that to realize the we. Because it's only with the realizing of the we that we will get a better world, or else we'll get a world of people who think that they are gods and to have wars with each other because, oh no, I'm the most powerful. No, you realize that we're all reflections of each other. We're all in this together. We're all co-creators. We should be all collaborating together. So I think that we will conclude there. But what I want to ask you guys is, I want to know, first of all, tell me if you want to continue this or not. Tell me in the comments, because what we would continue next is will focalization. Okay. So right now it's been, all these different lessons have been on establishing the higher self and connecting to the higher self. But next it's turning to will focalization, focalizing the will. Once one has a set. So we'd be moving on to new stuff. So tell me in the comments if you want to continue that or not. If you'd rather us talk about other things, different things, let me know. But if you need to watch this video a couple times, I'd highly recommend that you do, because the information in this video is very important. It's pretty critical here. And there's so much to unpack, because this is some of the biggest mistakes that are made. First of all, thinking that the self doesn't exist. Huge mistake. Realizing what the self is, that it is the thing that endures and does, the thing that is and does. And also other elements that wasn't in this book, but that I pointed out, that we have to realize that we are a we. So the first hurdle is realizing that, you know, these systems that say you don't have an enduring self, they're wrong. You do. Because when you strip away everything, you realize that there is something that endures, the thing that is doing the stripping away. And in addition to that, though, we realize that we are the I, and that we are the doer, and that we are the eternal I and the eternal doer. We realize that. But at this point, there's another part we don't want to get stuck at. We want to even go further than that, to realize that we are the we, because if we don't, then we'll get into the wrong mindset that can lead to, like I said, a lot of ideas of like dominance and control and overpowering others, which is not good. We want to realize that we are the I, that we are eternal, that we are the doer, but within that network of the we. The I is a reflection of the we. The I is a portion of the we. So we want to go from the ego self, or the lower self, to the higher self, or the I, and then to the we. So the illusory self, the higher self, and then the we. These are the three different perspectives: the avatar perspective, the Zadic perspective, and the absolute perspective, which makes up hyper awareness. So check out my other videos. By the way, if you're interested in our system, the Neogenian system, check out my book, Neogenesis, Dawn of the New Mind. To understand how to reach higher consciousness rationally. The first book is out right now, and the second book, Meta-Rationalism, The New Science of Mind. The links are in the descriptions of this video. And hey, what do you guys think about the candles? Tell me in the comments, in the replay. I like them. Let me know what you think. Become a member on YouTube. If you want to help my channel grow, you'll get access to all of our members only videos. We have great ones. The members only video I just released today was about near-death experiences and psychedelic trips. How do they compare? What's really going on there? And you can get access to our Discord server, where we have weekly live Neogenian classes. Anyway, just take a look at the different things. There's a lot of great stuff you can get, and it really helps out the channel. I appreciate it. Let's see. Make sure you follow me on Spotify, Dawn of the New Earth. And I want to give a shout out to everyone who supports. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Big shout out to Renaissance Fairy Cassidy, Angela, DB, Nusalina, Christopher, Eon, and Vanessa Moon. Thank you very much.